The first scream cut through the wind, sharp and desperate. It wasn't loud, but desperate. Sharp. Raw. In the middle of the Pecos desert, a young woman hung from a tree, her arms stretched tight by coarse ropes that bit deep into her wrists. Blood trickled down her fingers, soaking the cracked bark beneath her. Her skin was pale, almost ghostly, bruised in every shade of pain. The sun burned her eyes, and the wind cut her skin like glass. Flies circled her mouth as she tried to whisper through split lips, "Please, I can't breathe." Evelyn Harper had been hanging there since dawn. Her feet barely touched the ground, toes scraping dirt with each shuddering breath. She could no longer tell if she was alive or already fading into the dry Pecos wind. Her throat rasped, her chest heaved, and each inhale felt like swallowing sand. Her torn dress fluttered, revealing bruises that told their own story. Someone had hurt her. Someone had left her here to die. The sound of hooves echoed in the distance, slow, steady, cautious. A lone figure approached across the burning horizon, a rancher, hat pulled low, rifle slung across his back, boots dragging dust behind each step. Colton Hayes had lived in silence for years, his world reduced to fences, cattle, and ghosts of what once was. He thought the wind was playing tricks again, whispering things that weren't there, but then he heard it, that faint, broken voice. There. It hurts. He froze. Lantern light from his hand trembled against the dying sun. For a moment, the rancher just stood there. Breath caught between disbelief and dread. Then instinct took over. He ran. The dry earth cracked beneath his boots as he reached the tree. Up close, the horror became human. The ropes were so tight they had cut through skin. Her head drooped forward, blonde hair matted with dirt and blood. Colton drew his knife. With a single slice, the rope snapped. Evelyn collapsed into his arms, limp, trembling, still whispering that same broken phrase. There. It hurts. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck. A pulse, faint but real. He laid her gently on the ground, tore his coat from his shoulders, and wrapped it around her. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and blue, filled with confusion and terror. She tried to speak again, but only a wheeze came out. "Easy now," Colton murmured, his voice rough but steady. "You're safe. You hear me? You're safe." She blinked up at him, a single tear rolling down her cheek. The look in her eyes wasn't just fear, it was pleading, a silent question only he could answer. Would he stay? Would he save her? For a long moment, neither moved. Only the wind spoke, curling through the branches above them. In that sound, Colton heard something strange, something that felt alive again. The Pecos wind had carried a cry for help. Now it carried a choice. He lifted her carefully, her weight light as sorrow. Each step back toward the ranch felt heavier than the last. The horizon burned red behind him, bleeding into dusk. Somewhere out there, someone had done this to her. Someone was watching. As the sky darkened and the first stars pierced the clouds, a question burned in Colton's mind. If a stranger's voice could pull him out of his grief, what else waited in the shadows of Pecos tonight? The ride back to the ranch was slow and quiet. The night air in Pecos had turned cold, carrying that smell of dry dirt and smoke. Evelyn lay against Colton's chest, too weak to speak, her breath shallow but steady. He could feel every tremor that ran through her body. Every shiver felt like a whisper of what she had been through. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low. The wooden walls creaked like an old memory. Colton laid her gently on the cot beside the open door, where the desert air moved soft and slow. He poured a little water from his kettle into a cup. She tried to lift her hand, but it shook too hard, so he helped her, steady and patient. "Drink slow," he said softly. She took a small sip, coughed, then whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was broken, dry as the desert outside. He nodded, but said nothing more. He had never been good with words. He was a man who fixed fences, not hearts. But something about her silence kept pulling at him. After a few minutes, she started talking. Bits and pieces at first. Her name, Evelyn Harper, 20 years old. On her way west with a wagon train, they were headed for California. But one night, she said, the men came. Rough voices, gunfire, and the sound of horses. They took her. tied her up, told her they'd sell her to a saloon in El Paso. Then they laughed, said she'd fetch a good price. Colton felt his stomach tighten. He'd heard of that kind of evil before, whispered around campfires and saloons. The hollow vultures, men who preyed on the lost, the weak, the ones nobody would miss. He clenched his jaw. They left you out there to die, he asked quietly. She nodded, tears catching in the firelight. They thought someone was following them. They got scared and ran. Her voice cracked. I cried too loud. So they hit me. Colton didn't move. He just looked at the fire, the flames dancing like ghosts. He had buried his wife and daughter on this same land. He thought his heart had turned to stone after that. But now, watching this girl fight for breath, he felt something stir that he hadn't felt in years. You're safe here, he said finally. This ranch, it's yours till you can stand again. Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes wide, searching. Why are you helping me? Colton met her gaze, steady and quiet. Because somebody should have helped you sooner. She blinked, trying not to cry. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the window panes. For a moment, the fire flickered, and Colton saw something in her eyes. Not just fear, but a spark of life trying to come back. He turned away, pretending to check the kettle. But really, he just needed a second to breathe. As the flames burned lower, Evelyn whispered, "They'll come for me." Colton didn't answer. He just stared at the door, his hand resting near the rifle leaning by the chair. The hollow vultures never left things unfinished. The Pecos night grew darker, and somewhere far off, a coyote cried. Colton knew sleep wouldn't come easy tonight, because in that moment, he realized something that made his blood run cold. If they had left Evelyn as bait, then who were they really hunting? Morning came slow, lazy, like the world was trying to forget the night before. The air was still, heavy, the kind that smells of dust and dry grass. Colton stepped outside with his coffee mug, hoping the heat of it would clear his thoughts. The ranch was quiet. Too quiet. He walked toward the barn, boots sinking in the soft dirt. That was when he saw it. The body of a stray dog lying near the fence, eyes open, still. One clean bullet hole right between them. No hesitation, no mercy. Colton's jaw tightened. He looked around, scanning the open land. Tracks. Big ones. Fresh. Hoofprints led past the barn, circling the corral, and then he saw it on the trunk of the old cottonwood. A blackened mark burned deep into the bark. A letter. V. Twisted. Cruel. The hollow vultures had been here. He stared at that mark for a long time, his coffee going cold in his hand. It wasn't just a warning. It was a message. They wanted him to know. They were close. Inside. Evelyn sat by the window, wrapped in his old coat. Her color had come back a little, but her eyes were still shadowed. When Colton walked in, she saw the look on his face and knew they came, didn't they? She asked quietly. He nodded once. They left me a message. Fear flickered across her face, quick and sharp. They'll kill you if you keep me here. He set his hat on the table, voice calm but steady. They'll have to try. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two souls beaten by life, finding a strange kind of courage in the same silence. Then Colton moved fast. He gathered tools, rope, boards. Outside, he reinforced the doors, fixed the hinges, checked every bullet in his rifle. If they wanted a fight, they'd find one. Before dusk, he led Evelyn to the old storm cellar behind the barn. The air down there was cool and dry. He lit a lantern, set it on a crate. You stay here till I figure our next move, he said, her eyes filled with tears. I've been locked up enough. This isn't a cage, Colton said softly. It's a shield. She looked at him for a long time and then nodded. When he climbed out, he hesitated, hand on the trap door. Whatever happens, you hold on. You hear me? Her voice trembled. I hear you. As night fell, the wind started again, hissing through the grass. Colton stood on the porch, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. The hollow vultures were out there somewhere, waiting. And for the first time in years, Colton wasn't afraid. He was ready. Now, partner, if this story has your heart beating just a little faster, go ahead and subscribe. It helps keep the fire burning out here in the wild. And while you do, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it where you are? The wind started howling before sunset. Thick clouds rolled over Pecos like an army moving in slow. Colton could feel it in his bones. Something bad was coming. He checked every lock twice, every bullet in the chamber. Then took his rifle to the porch. The air smelled like rain and dust and danger. Lightning flashed across the open fields, bright enough to turn night into day for half a heartbeat. Then thunder followed, deep and angry. Down in the cellar, Evelyn sat on the cot, the small lantern beside her flickering. She held the note he had left, fingers tracing the words, "You deserve to live." Her heart beat too fast, matching the wind outside. She hated the silence, hated feeling trapped. When the first drops of rain hit the roof, she stood up, climbed the steps, and pushed the hatch open. The house was dark, the kind of dark that swallows sound. She called softly, "Colton." No answer. The storm roared louder. The wind rattled the window so hard it sounded like someone knocking. She moved toward the table, reached for the kettle. Her hand still shaking, then she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm, a boot step. Slow, heavy. Inside the house, before she could breathe, a hand grabbed her hair, yanking her back hard. She screamed, kicking, clawing, but the man was too strong. Rain dripped from his hat, his face half-shadowed, eyes cold and mean. Boss says you're worth a lot," he hissed. "Dead or alive?" Evelyn fought like hell. She grabbed the first thing her hand found, a kitchen knife, and swung. Steel met flesh. The man cursed, blood spilling between his fingers. He raised his boot, ready to stomp her down, but before he could, the door burst open. Thunder and lightning crashed together, framing Colton in the doorway. Soaked to the bone, his rifle roared once. The man dropped. Colton rushed to Evelyn, catching her before she hit the floor. Her breath came in gasps, her face pale but alive. He brushed her hair from her eyes. "You did good," he whispered. "You're safe now." But he wasn't sure that was true. He stepped to the window, eyes scanning the storm. The wind screamed through the cracks. In the flashes of lightning, boo! He thought he saw movement by the fence line. 3 shapes on horseback, watching, waiting. He turned back to Evelyn, his voice low. "This ain't over." Outside, the thunder rolled again, closer this time, as if the sky itself knew what was coming next. And somewhere out there in the rain, the hollow vultures were smiling. "So tell me, partner, would you stay and fight if the night came for you too?" The storm passed with the first light of morning. Puddles shimmered in the dirt like tiny mirrors, and the air smelled clean again. Colton stood by the window, the rifle still leaning against the wall. Outside, the fields were quiet, as if the land itself had survived something worth remembering. Evelyn sat at the table, her ankle bandaged, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. She looked different now, not just alive, but awake. There was a calm in her eyes, the kind that only comes after you face the dark and refused to break. She looked at Colton and smiled, a real smile this time. "You stayed," she said softly. He nodded. "I told you I would." A few days later, they rode into town together. Colton had a letter in his pocket, written by the marshal of Fort Rock. It was a warrant. By sundown, the hollow vultures were done. Every man who had hunted her was behind bars or buried under Texas dust. When it was over, Evelyn stood in front of the courthouse, her hands trembling. She turned to Colton and said, "I thought I'd never breathe free again." He tipped his hat. "You just did." Weeks passed. The ranch came back to life, new fences, fresh paint on the porch, the sound of horses again instead of silence. Evelyn learned to ride. Colton learned to laugh. Sometimes that was all the healing a person needed. One evening, as the sun sank low behind the Pecos hills, Evelyn stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, holding a folded paper. It was a marriage certificate, already signed. She handed it to him and said, "We could start over, if you want." He looked at her, eyes soft, tired, and full of something he thought he'd lost forever. Then he pulled her close and whispered, "I hear home now." The wind swept through the fields again, gentle this time, the kind of wind that carries peace instead of sorrow. For the first time in years, Colton Hayes wasn't a lonely rancher anymore. He was a man who'd found his reason to stay. Sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least expect it. Sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness to pull you out of the dark. So let me ask you this. If you heard a stranger crying for help tonight, would you stop and listen? Could you be someone's second chance? Take a deep breath. My friend, grab your cup of coffee or tea and just sit with that thought for a while. If this story touched your heart, go ahead and give it a like. And if you want more tales of grit, grace, and second chances under the western sky, hit that subscribe button. Because out here, every ending is just another beginning.